Hey everyone, welcome to Business Plans for FRC Teams, a part of the 2020 NE First University Day. My name's David Givens. I'm your presenter. Really excited to be with you and walk you through this presentation. Sorry I couldn't be with you live on the live for the presentation today, but I hope you enjoyed the content that I've put together, and I'm definitely going to be available for any follow-up questions anyone has. So without further ado, let's jump into the presentation. So first, a little bit about myself. So I have been a FIRST alum, involved with FIRST since 2010. I graduated in 2013 from FRC 1071. Since then, throughout college and now into my professional career, I've continued to be a volunteer in FIRST. I've held a lot of various different hats and a lot of different roles, but one that's really of particular is I'm both a judge and a judge advisor here in New England, so very familiarized with the awards process and definitely bringing you through the piece of preparing a business plan for the Entrepreneurship Award that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. Hope I can bring you some insights. In my day job, I just recently switched roles. I've been in marketing my entire career, but I'm now a digital marketing manager at Henkel Adhesive Technologies. We're the folks that are behind Loctite sealants and adhesives, and a great organization to work for. And I love it every day I'm around engineers, despite not being one myself. So, of course, obviously, as a FIRST alum, that comes back to my passion. For schooling, I have a Bachelor's of Business Administration and Marketing from Western Connecticut State University. So kind of a lot of what we're talking about is Business 101. And so definitely great stuff that are back to the fundamentals. And so while it's super useful for your team preparing for the awards, any students that are looking at pursuing a career in marketing, finance, business management, accounting, any of those kind of business fields, I think, these are kind of some core key skills and ideas that we're going to be talking about that, of course, you would expand upon within your formal business education. So our agenda today, first we're going to talk about the objective of the training and what we are going to be focusing on in this presentation. We're then going to talk about what a business plan is and what it isn't. We're going to touch on kind of a little bit of the in-depth of a real-world business plan, and then versus kind of what the first summary plan touches upon. We'll go through more in-depth of what that traditional business plan looks like. Then we're going to do a quick overview of the first summary business plan, and then we're going to deep dive into each of the sections and give you a quick overview of what it is. Then I'll show some resources that we offer, and we'll wrap up the whole presentation. So the objective for today is to gain a basic understanding, and this is key, right? It's a basic understanding of business plans, what makes up a business plan, what is an FRC summary business plan, and the key difference between a full real-world business plan that you would use and what the FRC summary plan does, and then going through the details. The hope is to give you an overview of what's involved, a general understanding. There's a lot more to the specifics in each section. We're going to cover a slide and briefly go over, but there's always a lot more info and knowledge. So, we talked earlier in that agenda slide about the resources, and I really encourage everyone to then take what you learned from this, utilizing those resources to get more details to help you prepare your team's business plan. So what is a business plan? So in the first box here, this is kind of a more textbook answer. So it's a formal written document containing business goals, the methodologies and how these goals can be attained, and the time frame within which these goals need to be achieved. It also describes the nature of the business, background information on the organization's financial projections, and the strategies it intends to implement to achieve the stated targets. What a mouthful. It's a lot, but that is the textbook definition. But more simply, it's a roadmap that provides a direction to a business or an organization. It's just a document of where you are, where you've been, and where you're going. And whether it's for your team or you're starting an actual business, it's going to help the audience understand that broader context of what's going on with your business in terms of then whatever reason you're providing that person, whether it be a judge who's just trying to get an understanding of how your team functions as a business for the Entrepreneurship Award, or maybe one day down the road if you're working on an actual business and you're going to potential financiers or investors, it's going to help them understand the broad context of your business and make a decision whether or not they plan on investing. So I've found surprisingly, especially in the first community, that there's sometimes a little bit of a confusion on what a business plan is. So here's just some things that a business plan isn't. And these are all important documents that your team still should have, but they are separate from the business plan. The business plan might influence some of these team documents, and vice versa. Some of these documents might influence your business plan, but they're separate. So the first thing is your bylaws. So this is going to be more informally, if you're associated with your school, your general way of operating, kind of rules for those teams that maybe are their own 501c3 or associated with 4-H, you may have more formal bylaws that actually dictate how your organization governs and operates. Your business plan might reflect what's in the bylaws, but the bylaws are going to be the actual document that dictates those. Another thing it's not is your team member handbook, right? Your rules, your regulations, kind of how a team is for team members. That's a separate document. Very important to have. Highly recommend you have it. Not this. It's not a marketing plan, okay? Now, I said the summary is included, though. So marketing plan is a part of your business plan. It's important that it's there. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it is not the marketing plan alone. There's a lot more that goes onto a business plan than just that. So you need a thorough and robust marketing plan to have a business plan, but that alone will not get it. And then last but not least, it's not a sponsorship packet or materials. Depending on the sponsor, depending on the relationship with them, depending on the level of ask, a business plan might be a part of that, but a business plan alone is not going to be selling a sponsorship, right? It's meant to give a holistic view, once again, of where your business has been, where it's at, and where you're going. Important for sponsors to understand that about your team, but when you're recruiting sponsors, there's also a lot of what's in it for the sponsor. You're going to be addressing that in other documents and materials. So when we look at a full business plan, it includes all of the following sections. So it always starts out with an executive summary. If you're not familiar with a lot of larger business documents or doing business writing, you typically always start that out. And all that is a 1 or 2 page summary that really kind of wraps up everything. The idea is that if I typically explain this with an executive summary, if you've got to drop that on a CEO or senior vice president's desk, who may not have time to go through the whole report, they should be able to read that and quickly get the high level understanding of what's going on within 5 to 20 minutes. Versus reading the whole report might take multiple hours. You still have to have the full report and do all that work to showcase that you've thought through the details of everything, but the executive summary is going to sum that up nice and quickly. From there, of course, that summary is going to be based on the following sections. So company description, that's looking at overarchingly your company, what you do, the markets you serve, etc. Market analysis will then dive more into those markets. Where are the markets that you're serving? What are their makeup? What are the potentials? So on and so forth. Organization and management is going to look at how you're structured as a company, both in a legal sense as well as how the people and the org charts within your organization are structured. And then, of course, who are the individuals that are actually leading your company? So you'll typically have little bios about those folks. Service or product line is diving more into depth of what you actually do, whether it's a service or a product, what are you making, and explains that out in more in detail. Market and sales is typically now where you're doing your marketing plan, so you're bringing that in. How are you going to market? How are you planning on navigating the market, growing sales, growing revenue, etc. Funding requests is then typically if you're doing a business plan kind of in more real world situations, 9 times out of 10 you're asking for money, whether it's from investors or a loan from the bank. You'll typically be required to show a business plan, especially if you're doing a small business. This is where you're going to detail out exactly what you need. And then last but not least is financial projections. So typically you're going to showcase current financial health of your business organization and where you see that coming, what you project your sales and profits will be over the next few years. So we kind of went through this really quick. Obviously, we can deep dive fully in, and part of that is because we want to showcase the first summary business plan, but if you are working on a full, robust business plan, this is everything that would be involved. So as you can tell, that's a lot. Each one of those sections are multiple pages, and it used to be in FIRST that you would prepare a full, real-world, robust business plan for the Entrepreneurship Award. I highly encourage teams who have the time and the resources. If you want and can, you should work on developing a full business plan. I think the exercise of doing it is going to help you think a lot more about your team, how you run, how you organize yourself. I've had students on my team not this past year, but the year before, kind of when we were in a full season, they've worked through a full business plan and really thinking through kind of everything that goes on with that. And it's really helped our team and our leadership team then better lead our team in a future direction. But the problem is these business plans took a lot of time to read, took a lot of time for the judges, and not a lot of teams participated because it is a lot of work. And if you don't have a huge team with a lot of members, right, that's manpower hours that you can be putting towards other areas, working on Chairman's Awards, developing the robot. Of course, it's a lot to be done on a FIRST team. So FIRST rolled out this summary business plan, which I'm excited about. As someone who's judging Entrepreneurship Award, it allows judges to quickly and easily understand the business structure and what's kind of going on in the business front within the team, and it allows the teams to get that information a lot quicker and not have to develop a 50-60 page document. So what is it? Shortened version of the full business plan. It's allowing the judges to be brought up to speed quickly, and more specifically, it's just 3 pages of actual content and 3 pages of appendices, so a 6-page document total. Quick, easy, great way to do that. So what is in a FIRST summary business plan? So you'll notice that a lot of similar sections that come from that full business plan that we walk through, or maybe not necessarily full sections, but these are components that would make up one of those full sections we talked about. So this comes directly from FIRST and as a part of the requirements for the Entrepreneurship Award. And we're going to walk through each one of these individually, but the FIRST summary business plan, of course, should start out with a mission statement, then team history and growth. Should take a look at the organizational structure of a team, risk analysis that the team could be facing, a look at their marketing plans, an overview of financials, and then an appendix that can include other information, but should at least include financials, specifically an income statement and a balance sheet, an organizational chart, and a SWOT analysis on the team. These charts will typically support sections, or do support sections that we listed earlier. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to walk through each of these sections. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them and what's involved. So the mission statement from FIRST requirement, please briefly indicate what you believe will be the driving engine of your team. Your mission should be clear and concise. It should represent to any reader exactly what your team strives to accomplish. And there's a reason that FIRST is asking for this. It is critical in any business or organization to have a mission statement, right? The mission statement lays out clearly and plainly for customers, for employees, for owners, for investors, for any stakeholders of a business or organization. Why does this business and organization exist? And more specifically, it's typically a sentence or a short paragraph, nothing long, that defines the existence of a business, a nonprofit, a government organization, etc. And the mission statement gets at the heart of why a company exists, not how, and not what it looks to achieve, right? It's why is the company here. So I've shared some mission statement examples with you to get an idea of more what that is. To think about when you're reading. So first, let's talk broad level and what a large organization's mission statement looks like. I've pulled this from the Walt Disney Company. So the mission of the Walt Disney Company is to entertain, inform, and inspire people around the globe through the power of unparalleled storytelling, reflecting the iconic brands, creative minds, and innovative technologies that make ours the world's premier entertainment company. And I love that because, first of all, even though when we think of the Walt Disney Company as just Disney, right? Friendly reminder, they own a lot of other brands that you wouldn't necessarily think of. ESPN and ABC, just to name a few, right? Brands that aren't necessarily associated, but it still gets to the heart of what they do. Entertain, inform, inspire. What makes them unique is their unparalleled storytelling ability that crosses across their brands and businesses. And, they have a goal, right? They're setting out to be the world's premier entertainment company. Clear, concise, very eloquent, but it gives you an understanding of what such a broad organization does. Narrowing it down a little bit, let's take a look at the mission statement of FIRST. And, while all organizations should have mission statements, I think in a nonprofit setting, it's particularly important because, ultimately, whereas organizations have a mission, their bottom line goal, right, is still to have profits for shareholders, right? It's the basic needs of a firm. Whereas a nonprofit organization is not trying to deliver profits to shareholders. So they have to be very clear about why they exist and what they're striving to go out and do. So for FIRST, the mission of FIRST is to inspire young people to be science and technology leaders and innovators by engaging them in exciting mentor-based programs that build science, engineering, and technology skills that inspire innovation and foster well-rounded life capabilities, including self-confidence, communication, and leadership. That's great, right? What is the mission? They want to inspire folks to be science and technology leaders. Preaching to the choir here, but you all know that, right? How are they doing that? Engaging in exciting mentor-based programs. That's what FIRST Robotics Competition and the entire FIRST progression of programs are. And the hope is that by doing that, they're going to provide and arm students with those science skills, and then, of course, giving them great life skills, including self-confidence, communication, and leadership. It's laid out plain and simple. I think for a lot of teams, as you're working on your mission statement, while your mission statement should absolutely be different than FIRST, it's definitely good to reflect back upon this because obviously a lot of what your mission is overlapping the mission of FIRST. So to just bring it a little bit more to home, I pulled an example mission statement from FRC Team 68, who have included this in their example business plan that was part of the FIRST fundraising toolkit. So their mission is to inspire peers to be more excited about science, engineering, and technology by engaging them in a hands-on, mentor-guided, life-changing journey that prepares everyone for the future. And I love that statement, right? A lot of overlap there, once again, from the FIRST mission statement, but it's simple, it's short, it's eloquent, but explains what they do. It takes a lot to go into a mission statement. Back in college, in one of my classes, we actually had to sit there and write several mission statements for proposed organizations. But I think it's really an important exercise for your team to do if you don't already have one. Go through and write this and make this the core of what you do. Don't just make this a mission statement you put in your business plan, but post it in your shop, put it in your other documentation. At the organization I work for, our mission statement, you will see it all the time around in the lobby and in conference rooms. It's the core ethos of why our business exists. It should be the same for your team. All right, so moving on. Team history and growth. Please briefly highlight where your team is from and how your team has grown and or managed turnover with emphasis on the past 2 years. So to take that simply, give an overview of your team, right? So start out with where you're based, your founding story, why did you come into existence? Remember, we talked about the mission statement is the why you exist, not how. Now you're going to talk about that how the team came about. And then talk about kind of the growth of where you've been, where you started, how you've progressed, both in terms of metrics of team members that you've had on your team, in terms of the way you've been engaging your community, and of course, performance within FRC. It's really important to understand this, especially for judges, because this shows us that over time, how has your team managed to grow, to stay focused on making improvements, right? In any business, in any nonprofit, in any organization, status quo is never good enough, right? We are always looking at improving, striving, getting better, right? Whether that's growing your bottom line in a business or if you're in a nonprofit and being able to serve more people with whatever your mission statement does. So that comes back to you on teams. And like I don't have to preach that, improvement and always doing your best and striving to do better is a core part of FIRST. But you want to definitely be reflecting that within your business plan. So next, we're going to take a look at organizational structure. So first, ask for you to please provide how your team operates and how you continue to grow your program with an emphasis in the next 2 years. So now you're both looking at your operating and then how you look forward. So things that you want to make sure you're including, how are you structured? And when I say that, I more mean in a kind of a legal sense. Are you school affiliated? Are you 4-H? Are you an independent nonprofit? Are you a neighborhood group, right? How is your team coming together? Then you want to showcase how your student leadership is structured. In this section, you want to provide some color and context to how that is, and then you're going to back that up with the organizational chart in the full appendix that we'll talk about. And then same thing, how is your mentor structured? And then you will also want to talk about kind of the relationship between students and mentors. Now, I want to be clear. There's no one right answer to this, and I think a lot of teams have different ways of operating on the student and mentorship involvement, and FIRST has, of course, made their opinion perfectly clear. That's up to each individual team, and it is up to each individual team, the involvement of mentors and students. Judges aren't going to be necessarily looking at, oh, okay, well, the mentors are too involved or not, but it's more important that your team does have some clear lines of distinction of what the mentors are responsible for and what the students are responsible for. And then, of course, how do you operate as a team? So you've got this organization structure, but how do you put it into practice? How do you put it into life? How do your sub-teams actually work? How do they work with each other? So things you want to talk about are your meeting rhythms, your operating models. What are your processes? You want to deep dive into all that. If you've got a unique way of doing it, this is definitely the time to show and share that with the judges. So, of course, org chart should be within the appendix, but it ties back to this section. What is an org chart? Simply a diagram that shows the structure of an organization and the relationships and the relative ranks of its parts, positions, and jobs. Great example of what an org chart looks like here on this slide. So you want to just put something together, right? So if you've got maybe your team captain, and then you've got your sub team leads, and then under that you've got, kind of members, or even maybe a more hierarchical structure, lay that out, right? There's no one right way to do it, but showcase that, because A, it's good to know that, B, the judges are curious, and C, if you've got a unique way of structuring your team, it's definitely going to get the judges' attention. To me, I always love when teams have unique ways of structuring and organizing members, and there's a lot of different ways out there, so definitely take a look at, we'll show some of the resources and look at what some other teams have done, but make sure you have a very clear org chart in your business plan. So next, we're going to look at risk analysis. Please describe, this is what FIRST says, please describe how your team deals with risks and opportunities, and also describe your team's strengths. Consider using a SWOT analysis to show this. I'm just going to say use a SWOT analysis to show this. So if you're not familiar with the SWOT analysis, we'll go over it a little bit more in depth, but this is such a commonly used tool that if you go to business school, you learn out of the gate. Even if you don't go to business school, you typically learn SWOT analysis out of the gate. And it is used in marketing plans, it is used in business plans. It's just a great tool and easily satisfies this requirement in a quick, clean, visual way. All right, so now we're going to take a look at what a SWOT analysis is. And as I said, this is a tool that typically you will learn right in business school and is used in marketing plans, business plans, anywhere from teams to small nonprofits, all the way up to the largest multinational corporations. So it's a really critical and a great tool to do a quick analysis on a part or a whole of a business organization. SWOT can be laid out multiple ways, but commonly and visually the best way to do it is in this 4-quadrant grid. The first part of SWOT is strengths and weaknesses. So strengths and weaknesses look internally at your team or organization. Once again, they're looking inwardly. I think it's really important to stress that. So strengths, looking at the positives that your team currently has. Great examples of that could be the size of your membership base, the quality of your mentors that you have, amount of funding, anything that's a positive that gives your team a competitive advantage, both in FIRST as well as just operating as a club or activity or sport within your community, is a strength. A weakness are things that are negatives. So it's sometimes tough to work on the weakness part of a SWOT because it forces you to be critical about your team and about your organization. And I know we like to typically think about the positives and things, but this is really important that you do this. If you're not able to identify your weaknesses in your team or in an organization or in business, you're never going to be able to improve and get better. So it's really important that you go through this process and you list out what your weaknesses are. Weaknesses could be maybe you are missing certain areas of expertise in your mentorship. Maybe you're struggling to recruit students. These are all great examples of weaknesses. So then we look at opportunities and threats. These are focused externally. They're looking at the larger environment that you're operating in and what is out there that could help you and hurt you, but is not directly effective of your team. Opportunities that FRC teams may face may include, for example, let's say a new large business moves to town. That's now an opportunity because that's potentially a new sponsor that you can go out and get. Another opportunity may be that your population size is growing in your school, which means there's more team members that you could potentially recruit, or more potential recruits to become team members that you could then pull in to your team. Threats, same thing, looking externally, but now looking at the negatives. For example, a threat might be if there are potential cuts to your overall school's budget, that may mean that that's a threat to the particular budget that your team gets. Threats could also be other sports or activities, right? Those are things that are pulling away potential other members. Threats could be things that are going to impact businesses that could cut your funding. Great example of a threat that we're all kind of facing right now is COVID-19, right? Not in the sense of it's affecting us from a health sense, it is, but also, right, obviously economically, there's been some struggles out there right now. And I'm sure teams' fundings are going to be affected by that. That's a great example of a threat. Same thing like the weaknesses and strengths strengths and weaknesses. You want to be critical about these threats. You want to be honest about these threats, right? These are things out there that could negatively affect your team, but if you're honest and you list them, it then allows you as a team to address them, to try to either leverage opportunities or your strengths to minimize those threats. So this is a SWOT analysis. Definitely a lot more information on it, but definitely make sure you include that in your appendices when talking about kind of the risk analysis section. So next is marketing. Section of the business plan that comes after my heart, obviously, as a marketer myself. This is where you're going to talk about everything that you're doing to get your team and brand out there. That's really what FIRST says, is just how do you get your team and your brand out there. A little bit more in depth of some things that I think you should be thinking about from my perspective. This is where you talk about how you recruit your team members. That's absolutely actually a critical component of marketing, right? Every year a class graduates, you need to recruit more people. Ideally, your team is growing in size a little bit each year so you can impact more students with the FIRST experience. You need to be out marketing and recruiting for that. How are you getting your sponsors? That's another key point of marketing. I think there's other sections that definitely talk more about sponsor relationships, but marketing is a part of that. Your brand and getting your team out there is what allows you to bring in those crucial funding resources to continue doing what you're doing. And then another thing to think about is how are you leveraging your marketing to engage your community? So this isn't a section to really talk about how you're engaging your community, right? We have a whole other award called the Chairman's Award that we focus on that. But obviously, a lot of what you're doing to engage the community requires marketing to be effective, to get out there, to really spread that message of FIRST and the importance of science and technology. This is a great time to talk about those marketing programs and tools that you're using to accomplish that. So a little bit more specifically, I think kind of when we think about what those tools and tactics are that address the above questions, this is things to think about that you're going to list. So you're going to talk about, your social media presence. What's that looking like? I know a lot of teams in New England have phenomenal social media presence. So talk about that, but don't just say we use social media. Talk a little bit about your strategy, your plans, how you leverage the different platforms and the audiences that you're going after. What are ads that you're using? This is where you talk about that. This is where you talk about your brand. So make sure to talk about the brand, what's involved, what the brand stands for, kind of all those things. This is also where we're going to talk about public relations, or you might hear a term called earned media. So are you getting into your town's local newspaper? Have you been putting press releases that have gotten you on the local news? Talk about all of that as well. It's all part of marketing kind of communications in a broader sense. And then also talk about in the marketing section your strategic partnerships. So obviously your sponsors are there, and there's a piece of the business plan where we talk a little bit more about that. But also, are there other teams or clubs or associations that you partner up with to conduct the business and mission of your team? This is where you're going to talk about those. It's all kind of part of that broader marketing context for your team. So Then there's the financial section. So first kind of breaks this into three components, and I've broken this down here. This wording comes directly, of course, from the award description. Please include information on team finances. They're going to ask that you include an income statement and a balance sheet as an example in the appendix. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's the raw numbers. The second question is, how is your team funded and how do you budget? So this is where you're going to explain, where is that money coming from? So your sponsors, who are they? What are they? If you're bringing in money elsewise, maybe you have actual revenue generating business activities, such as maybe if you sell items online, or if you do certain fundraisers that aren't direct, just asking sponsors for money. This is where you talk about it. You're also going to talk about your budgeting process, and this is how you're spending your money. How do you decide to allocate it? Whether you're an FRC team, this is your personal budget, or you're a $1 million multinational corporation, at the end of the day, you only have so much money you can spend, and there's likely more things you want to spend money on than you have. So this is really talking about, how do you think through that? How do you decide to best invest your resources to best help your team achieve high performance on and off the field? And then, of course, FIRST more specifically wants to dive into those points and ask how you, for you to highlight your relationship with your sponsors and how you recognize them. Now, FIRST asks for it here. Bringing in money is definitely part of financials. I think it also ties back to marketing, right? Because they work in tandem, right? You need sponsors to have strong financials, but you use marketing tools and tactics and strategies to maintain your relationships with your sponsors and recruit new ones. So that kind of is a discussion, a discourse that works in both sections. FIRST prefers it here, so definitely I think elaborate on it a little bit more than marketing, but it's going to tie back into that section. So a lot of this is pretty easy. You're going to write this in written paragraph form, but I think where there's often sometimes some confusion is, what is an income statement and a balance sheet? And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that and give you a high level. Now, I want to stress a balance sheet and an income statement are tools that are actually used out in the real world. They're part of what are called the 3 core financial statements that any business uses. So it's these two, and then a third one that we're not going to talk about, called a statement of cash flows. There's a lot more to these, and anyone who's an accountant can tell you there's a lot more that goes into preparing these. But understanding these sheets are kind of the first steps to learning accounting. And once again, I talked about, for those who might be considering pursuing any business major in college, whether or not you become an accountant, you're going to have to take accounting classes. I've taken 2, and I'm currently in my 3rd semester as part of grad school. So it happens. So understanding these are really critical and crucial. And even if you're not an accountant, this is how you understand the financial strength and health of any business or organization. So knowing these and preparing these are really critical for your team. So what are they? Okay, so a balance sheet basically looks at, does an organization have assets to meet financial and operational obligations? In short, it shows every asset and liability that an organization has, as well as equity. It's focused on a specific moment in time, so a balance sheet doesn't show trends over a course of time. It can only be as of one particular day, and it doesn't really show the financial performance of an organization. This not as critical for a FIRST team as a nonprofit, but a business, it's not going to show how profitable you are, for example. An income statement, however, is going to show that financial performance, and really that's focused on looking at revenues, expenses, and profit. Sometimes you'll hear an income statement also referred to as a profit and loss or a P&L statement. This looks at over a period of time. Income statements often can look anywhere from a day, a week, a month, a quarter, but more common, you're going to see them either in the quarterly length, or in the case of what you should be doing for your FRC summary business plan, it should be about a year in time, looking at typically either from a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st, or a fiscal year that you might set off, which for a lot of teams I recommend, as well as first fiscal year, which runs from July 1st through June, the end of June. So 2 statements, right? One's basically showing kind of what you have as well as any debts you have, and the other showing how much money you bring in and where are you spending that money. Two different sheets that look at different stuff. So there's a lot more to these. I mean, this is itself its own class, so we're not going to spend a lot of time. But basically, this is a balance sheet. It's going to look at kind of all the assets your team has on the left-hand side, starting out with more current assets, like just money and cash you have in the bank, things like that. And then longer-term assets, such as if you have any equipment, that's common going to be to an FRC team. But for larger businesses, looking at land and buildings and things like that. And then on the right-hand side, liabilities. These are basically debts, and they kind of stack from short-term debts to longer-term debts. And then at the bottom is something called equity. So for a business, this is basically what's remaining after when you look at kind of the total value, asset valuation of the company. Once you remove debts, what's left over, that's basically the book value attributable to the owners of the company. Nonprofits don't use equity sections because there isn't true equity, but they call it retained assets. But this is still that piece of basically what are the amount of assets that are left over after you take out liabilities. So your team should absolutely have something like this. And this kind of shows collectively how many resources you have at your hand at a moment in time. An income statement, right? We talked about earlier. So this is showcasing what you're bringing in and what you're taking out. So you look here, and I'm going to go ahead and just bring a pen. You look up into this section here. So first you have your sales, also known as revenue. You're not really selling items as an FRC team, but this is all your sponsorship money, your sponsorship money, your fundraising, etc. So first line looking at kind of what you brought in total, and then the direct cost here to achieve that. For a first team, you're probably not going to have that, except for, let's say you're doing like something like a bake sale, and you are selling to raise money. Well, there was the cost to actually put on that bake sale. You'll kind of include that up here. And then it continues to further down and shows more expenses. So these are all your operating expenses. So this is looking at everything, you know, the cost to fabricate your robot, to travel, all your team expenses. Now, once again, and then you have net income. So for a business, this would be profit left over at the end of the year. For an FRC team, we're all nonprofits. But this is money that you now have at the end of the year to then bring forward into next year. So maybe, you know, you decide next year, because if you've got a balance left over, that you can spend more than you actually bring in the following year. So that was everything that goes into a first summary business plan. I know it was a lot and it was a high level overview, but of course the hope here is not to have you walk away and know everything there is to put together a first summary business plan, but the hope is to walk you through what's involved and give you a little bit idea of what you need to start thinking about. I know me, whenever I go to a session like this, it gets my mind churning, but to actually then carry out and execute the task that I'm shown requires more resources. So I've listed a bunch of great resources here on this slide. So I'm going to pause and make sure you get a chance to take them in. But these are example summary business plans from other FIRST teams, more examples on what business plans are. We talked about a lot of financial and accounting stuff. These are great resources to learn more about that. So I highly encourage you to follow up and dig in and dive and learn more about all these topics. Like I said, every section of that business plan we went over itself could be a full hour-long class that we could talk about. So definitely make sure that you're educating yourself and taking advantage of these resources. All right, so to wrap up, I just want to recap our agenda and objectives to put it all together. So first we started out and we looked at our objective. We looked at what a business plan is and isn't. We talked briefly about kind of what a real world business plan is and the differences that a first summary business plan has. We did a quick overview of what a real world business plan is. Then we dived a little bit more into showcasing exactly what that first summary business plan is. We then deep dive through each of the sections and showcase what's involved. And then we showcase the resources that you can use to further your education and learn more about preparing a business plan, both in a first summary and overarchingly. So recapping our objective, right? The hope was that we're going to give you that basic understanding of what business plans are, which we did through the quick overview. We then showcased what makes up a business plan. Hopefully now you understand kind of the general makeup and sections of it. Now you understand too what a FRC summary business plan is and how that does vary from a full business plan that a company would use out in the real world. And we've explored the details and makeup of what is in a FIRST summary business plan. I want to thank you so much for attending the presentation today. Once again, I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there live with you, unfortunately due to having other commitments, but I hope you really enjoyed the presentation and learned a little bit more about what's involved in a business plan, both for FIRST and for real life. Normally this is a great time because I love doing Q&A, but since I can't do it live with you, I've go ahead and listed my contact out. That's my email as well as my LinkedIn. Definitely encourage you to reach out with any questions that you may have about business plans, FIRST summary business plans. If you're a student out there that's interested in going to any business field, have any questions about what that's involved like, especially marketing, an open inbox, and I always love engaging with other members of the FIRST community. So with that, thanks again for attending. Please enjoy all the rest of the conferences here at any FIRST University Day. And of course, stay safe out there and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.